Am I audible?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. So, good afternoon to all the participants, and thank you to the ICSI IPA Institute who has providing me such an wonderful opportunity to present today's topics, which is the difference between the financial creditor and operational creditor. So, before starting the topic, we should know what is the IBC and why this act has been enacted. So just present some presentation before all the participants. So I just share my screen. So first of all, we should know what is the IBC. Uh, Everyone can see in my screen now.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, okay, okay. Here is. So first of all, I would like to introduce what is the IBC. So, by background, first I will start with the background. Prior to the IBC, the legislative framework for insolvency and restructuring was fragmented across multiple legislation, such as the Companies Act, the Sikh Industrial Companies Special Provision Act, SARFAESI Act, and the Recovery of Debt Due to Bank and Financial Institutions Act to 1993 and others. So, before come into effect the IBC 2016, these frameworks are already existing, and there are different provisions has been provided in these acts. Like Company Act, there is the winding up proceeding has been provided in the Companies Act. You all are aware of this. So, so there was the legislation has felt that there should be a comprehensive and time bound framework for resolving the insolvency and bankruptcy cases. So the IBC come into effect. IBC 2016 was come into force in India, and this provide a comprehensive and time-bound framework for resolving the insolvency and bankruptcy cases. So prior to the IBC, the legal framework for insolvency and bankruptcy were fragmented and involving multiple laws and forums, which led to the delays and inefficiencies. So the key objective of the IBC 2016 is, the first is consolidation of law. Means the consolidation of law, we can see in the IBC, there is the insolvency, there is the bankruptcy, there is the pre-packaged insolvency, there is the voluntary liquidation. So everything has been now consolidated. It is within the one law, which is the IBC code 2016. And the another key objective of the IBC is that this is the time-bound process. So the professionals who are IP already knows there is the 180 days time limit has been prescribed in the act, and 90 days extension we can take. So this is the time-bound process. Every forms have to be submitted within 7 days, within 14 days, within 21 days. So the time limit has been mentioned in the act, which is very, this act is a very time-bound process. The third is the key objective of IBC 2016 is creditor process. Yeah. Any query? Am I audible?
Yes, yes.
Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am. You are audible. You are audible.
So this is the creditor-driven process. The third key objective of IBC is that the creditor-driven process means when the company has gone for the CIRP process, the whole management come into the hand of the IP, and the creditor are the decision making power. And by 66% of the voting, they have passed the resolution, and they can give any decision on any process. So the creditor driven process, we can say this is a creditor driven process. And the fifth is the fourth is maximization of asset. So in the act key objective is also key maximize the asset value. The IP, there is the duty, in the duty of IP is already mentioned ki have to maximize the asset of the company. So this is the maximization of the asset value. And fifth is the promotion of entrepreneurship. And the sixth is the facilitating easy exit. So the facilitating easy exit is the when the company is not having the having money to pay its dues, can go by section 10 IBC, and can initiate the IBC proceeding against itself, and can, if having the sufficient fund to pay to repay the due, can go for the liquidation process, the voluntary liquidation process. So this is also a very facilitating easy exit process. So the key objective of the IBC, these are the key objective of the IBC 2016. Now we will go for the history. What is the history of this act? It was passed by the Lok Sabha on 5th May 2016 and by the Rajya Sabha on 11th May 2016. Subsequently, it received assent from the President Pranab Mukherjee and was notified in the Gazette of India on 28th May 2000. So this was come into force on 28th May 2016. And there are some early cases. The first case, which was in which the order was passed by the NCLT. The case name is Synergic Dubre Automotive Limited on 14th August 2017. And the first case which was come before the Supreme Court, and in which case the order has been passed by the Supreme Court, which is the Innovative Industries Limited versus ICICI Bank Limited. Are the early cases which were decided in the IBC, the first cases. And now there are some of the acts was repealed. So the
ट्रक खड़े हुए हैं यहाँ पे, ट्रक होते हैं ना इस टाइम तो यहाँ मत हो गए, यहाँ तो बहुत गंदे हो रहा है यार.
there are some voice has been coming. Kindly mute. So the repealed acts, there are some of the repealed acts, which is the Presidency Town Insolvency Act and the Provisional
Madam, excuse me.
Act.
Madam, excuse me. I think Deepak Kumar's should go mute, because his voice is coming. Something is going on the background, so
Yeah.
it disturbs. We can't hear you properly.
Yeah. So
हाँ जाओ मैं.
I'm not able to mute him. Deepak Kumarji, kindly mute yourself. So the repealed act was Presidency Town Insolvency Act and the Provisional Insolvency Act 1920. So these are the repealed act, and some of the amended acts. Some amendments has also enforced in some of the acts, which acts are the Sikh Industrial Companies Repeal Act, the Recovery of Debt Due to Bank and Financial Institution Act, the SARFAESI Act, and the Companies Act. So some acts are amended and some acts are repealed after enactment of the IBC Code 2016. So now I will see what is the applicability, where is the applicability, and what is the scope and structure of IBC. So the applicability is all kind of corporate enterprises, means whether this is the private limited company, public limited company, limited by shares, unlimited company, In all type of companies, this act is applicable. And this is also applicable on the LLP, the limited liability partnership firms. So this is applicable corporate entities, LLPs, partnership firms, normal partnership firm, and the individuals also who are registered as a proprietorship firm or something and individually doing some business. So these type of individuals are also covered under this act. So what is the structure of this act? In entirely, the code has 255 sections and are divided into 5 parts. There are 5 parts. The first part is the preliminary definitions has been provided in the first part, and the second part is the insolvency, resolution and liquidation for corporate person. Here is what is the meaning of corporate person. Corporate person means the public limited, private limited companies, LLPs. So the corporate enterprises are included in the corporate person. So the first part, the liquidation and CIRP for the corporate person. And the third part is applicable for the individuals and partnership bankruptcy and insolvency resolution. And the fourth part is the regulation of insolvency professionals, agencies, and information utilities. And the fifth part is the miscellaneous enables amendments in other statutes, such as the Companies Act and schedules. There are 11 schedules provides for the amendment to the carried out in other statutes. So what is the scope? The scope is insolvency. First of all, the company will go in the CIRP process. If any proceeding has been initiated against the company, whether in section 7, 8, 9, the company will go in the for the CIRP process. This is the insolvency process. And the second is the pre-packaged insolvency process. This is also the scope. The I will tell you what is the difference between the insolvency and pre-packaged insolvency process. In insolvency, there is the whole management was given into the hand of the IP. But in the pre-packaged insolvency, the management will not go into the hand of the IP. This will be still in the hand of the company's promoters and directors. So the insolvency, pre-packaged insolvency, liquidation, voluntary liquidation, solvent insolvency, and the bankruptcy, these are the scope of the Insolvency Act. So this is the what is the framework of the code. Now, who is the regulator? The regulator is the IBBI. Main regulator is the IBBI, who is regulating the whole IBC Act. And there are some agencies like ICSI, ICAI, ICWAI. These 3 agencies is under the IBBI. So insolvency professional agencies, and in IP, insolvency professionals and information utilities. These are the regulators which are basically work in the IBC. And what is the adjudicator? It means adjudicating authorities where we can file our cases. So this is the NCLT for the corporate entities. Means I was already told you what is the corporate entities, whether public, whether private, whether unlimited, whether limited. So all the corporate entities and the LLPs, if they want to initiate any proceeding, they will go in NCLT. But if any proceeding has required to initiate against the individual and the partnership firm, means non-corporate entities, then will DRT, Debt Recovery Tribunal, will held these proceedings against the individuals and the partnership firms. So this is the framework of the code. Now, I will tell you before differentiating the financial creditor and operational creditor, I will tell you who will initiate the CIRP process. The financial creditor can initiate CIRP process against the company, against the LLP. The Operational creditor can initiate the CIRP process against the company, against the LLP, and the corporate applicant itself can pass the special resolution by the shareholders' consent, can also proceed the CIRP process against itself. So there are some differences in FC. In case of financial creditor, how to initiate, there are some process in for initiating the CIRP already mentioned in the regulations. So the regulations and sections with together we have required to read when we want to initiate any proceeding against any company. So but in operational creditor, if we want to initiate any proceeding as per in the capacity of a operational creditor under section 9, we should first give a notice, a demand notice we have required to be given. This is a 10 days notice we have required to be given to the company. And if it will not repay your debts within 10 days, then you can initiate the main petition before the NCLT. So this is the mandatory requirement in this operational creditor. If want to initiate CIRP, will required to give demand notice. But in case of the financial creditor, there is no need to give any notice before initiating any proceeding against the company. But in OC, this is required. So will this is today's main topic. So we'll start. What is the creditor? So section 3 subsection 10 of the IBC code T 2016 provides, this is defined the term creditor as follows. The creditor means any person to whom a debt is owed and includes a financial creditor, an operational creditor, a secured creditor, or a unsecured creditor, and a decree holder. So this section have covered all type of creditors, whether financial, whether operational, whether secured, whether unsecured, whether a decree holder. This is the wider section, we can say, in the IBC. And everybody knows who is the IP is dealing in the IP professional. Before 2020, before the COVID, there was a threshold limit which was the 1 lakh. But after introducing the COVID in 2020 March, the threshold limit has been increased from 1 lakh to 1 crore. So if now in these days, if you want to file any application, any petition, either in section 7 or section 9 or section 10, you should there should be a due amount of rupees 1 crore. So if this is also point to be noted, so I have just tell you, because this is also crucial to know. Now, what is the financial creditor? The financial creditor, section 5 subsection 7 of the IBC code itself provides, that means any person to whom a financial debt is owed and include a person to whom such debt has been legally assigned or transferred. What is the legally assigned or transferred here? It means, I will show you the example. If if a homeowner sell their house to the buyer, we can say this is the legally assigned or transferred. So this is the financial creditor, means any person to whom a financial debt is owed and include a person to whom such debt has been legally assigned or transferred. Now, what is operational creditor? Section 5 subsection 20 of IBC code provides, the operational creditor means a person to whom an operational debt is owed and includes any person to whom such debt has been legally assigned or transferred. Means example of legally assigned and transferred is here. Suppose is the software developer assign the right to their code to the company they work for. Is like the employer-employee relationship is here. So we can say the financial creditor means any person to whom the financial debt is owed, and the operational creditor is to whom the operational debt is owed. Now, what is operational debt and what is financial debt? So we'll go the next slide. The financial debt. What is the financial debt? Section 5, subsection 8 of the IBC Code 2016 define the financial debt is defined as a debt along with any interest that is disbursed against the consideration for time value of money. So this point is required to be noted. When the IP, as a IP, if you will verify your forms of claims which were submitted before you, you should know ki, is there any consideration for the time of value of money is involved or not. So we should check the consideration for the time value of money is the important term in this. This includes money borrowed against payment of interest, any amount raised through the issuance of bonds, notes, debentures, or similar instruments, any amount raised under any other transaction having the commercial effect of borrowing. Means there should be the commercial effect of borrowing is also present. So there is the two terms required to be noted in case of the financial debt. The first is the consideration for time value of money, and the second is the commercial effect of borrowing, because there are so many judgments of Supreme Court, NCLT has been passed on the basis of this term. So now I have tried to elaborate the term, the time value of money. What is the time value of money? The time value of money is not only a regular or timely return received for the duration for which the amount is disbursed as an amount in addition to the principal, but also covers any other form of benefit or value occurring to the creditor as a return for providing money for a long duration. Means if uh, if we give some amount, but there is we know there is some return, if this will be back to me, there is some return has been given to the creditor, then this will be considered as a term is the time value of money. Now, what is the commercial effect of borrowing? So, meaning of commercial effect of borrowing, where amount raised upfront from the parties with the commercial intent of temporary use of funds and returning an equivalent asset later, while accounting for interest component, were held to have the commercial effect of borrowing under section 5(8) subsection 5 of the IBC. So some of the example of financial creditor I have also prescribed is the loans from banks and financial institutions, bonds and debentures, amounts raised through commercial paper, derivative transactions, home buyers, allottees of the real estate project. So these are some of the example of financial creditor. Now, what is operational debt? This is the operational debt. The section 5, subsection 21 of the IBC Code 2016 provides the operational debt is defined as a claim in respect of the provision of goods or services, including employment, or a debt in respect of the payment of dues arising under any law for the time being in force and payable to the central government and state government or any other local authority. For example, outstanding payment to the supplier for goods and services provided, salary and wages owed to the employees, and dues owed to the government such as taxes. So if we are verifying the claim as a IRP, RP, or as a liquidator, so we should know what is the financial debt and what is the operational debt, because on the basis of these terms we have required to accept the claim or otherwise reject the claim. In case in the liquidation also we have the power to reject the claim. So this is the wider term of the financial debt and the operational debt. Now, what is the key characteristic of the financial creditor? So the key characteristic of the financial creditor is the time value of money. First, I already told you the essence of financial debt is that it involves a consideration for the time value of money. There should involve a consideration for the time value of money. And the second is voting right in COC. You know, most of the when any IBC CIRP has been initiated against the company or the LLP, there is if there is no financial creditor, only in that condition the operational creditor will constitute as a COC. But if there is exists the financial creditor, then only financial creditor will be the COC, and they have the decision making power. If they have, there is the 66% voting power, by 66% voting power, they have passed any resolutions, the decision will be final. But the operational creditor have the right to attend the COC meeting if they have amount of debt is 10% of the total claim. So they can only attend the meeting, but they have no voting right. So the key characteristic of the financial creditor is the time value of money, the voting right in COC, and the other is priority in liquidation. As you know, the section 53 provides, first we will make the payment of workman and employee COC cost, sorry, first, and then first I will pay the IP fee, IRP fee, RP fee, and second is the workman and employee payment. And the financial creditors also have the higher priority in the distribution of the asset during the liquidation, as the waterfall mechanism of the section 53, which is provided under the IBC code. So these are the key characteristic of the financial creditor. Now we'll see what is the key characteristics of the operational creditors. The goods and services operational debt typically arises from the transactions related to the supply of goods and services. Limited role in COC. The operational creditor, generally, I was already told you, if there is a financial creditor, then the COC committee will be constituted by them only. And they some notices was also sent to the OC and management also to attend the meeting, but at that time they have no right to vote. So the limited role in IBC, operational creditor generally do not have the voting right in the COC unless their aggregate dues constitute more than 10% of the total debt. It means they can all attend the meeting, but they doesn't have the right to vote. And lower priority in liquidation. And you know, the first in waterfall mechanism, if we will say, the first the CIRP cost will pay, the second is the wages, salary, workman employee dues has been paid, and then the FC has been paid, and after that the operational creditor have the will make the payment. So the operational creditor have a lower priority in the distribution of assets compared to the financial creditor, but are prioritized above equity shareholders. लेकिन equity shareholders से पहले we will pay to the operational creditor. So these are the key characteristics. Now, what is the difference between the financial debt and the operational debt? So the nature, first the nature. In financial debt, the money lent with interest. But in operational debt, payment for goods, services, or dues. Because in when we see if we have taken the loan, like home loan or any type of loan from the bank, then this will be considered as a financial debt. But if we have supplied the goods and services, but the company has not made our payments of against these goods and services, taxes, dues, then this will be considered as a operational debt. So the nature, first we have required to check what is the nature of the debt. And now time value of money, this is essential in financial debt, but this is not essential in operational debt. I was already told you what is the time value of money. Now, some examples like loans, bonds, and debentures, and operational debt, supplier dues, salaries, taxes, voting rights. We already discussed above. Section 5, subsection 28. A voting rights of a financial creditor is based on the proportion of the financial debt owed to such financial creditor. Means, suppose if the company has taken a loan from you, and there are some amount of loan has been involved as a financial debt, but some amount of loan has been involved as a operational debt. So we will bifurcate the what is the financial debt and what is the operational debt, and on the basis of this we will constitute the COC, and the amount to the extent of this will be considered as a financial debt will take part in the COC meeting as a financial creditor. So voting right of a financial creditor is based on the proportion of the financial debt owed to such financial creditor. The approval of committee of creditors shall be obtained by a vote of not less than 66% of the voting shares. So if we in case of COC, 66% voting rights, voting required to pass any resolution. But in case of operational creditor, shall not have any right to vote at the meeting of the committee of creditor. I was already told you, the operational creditor have no right to vote. So now the intention of corporate insolvency resolution process. Section 7(1) on occurrence of default. We already discussed if there is financial institutions or banks who has already provided the loan to the company, they can initiate the proceeding against the company under Section 7. So, on occurrence of a default, a financial creditor shall either by itself or jointly with other financial creditor may file an application for initiating the CIRP against the corporate debtor before the adjudicating authority. You know what is the adjudicating authority? This is the NCLT in case of corporate entities, but DRT in case of the partnership firm or the individuals. And in case of operational debt, there is some process is different. First of all, as per Section 8(1), we will give the demand notice to the company. If our 10 days demand notice, we will provide first. If the company not paid the dues in this period, then only then we can initiate the proceeding. So Section 8(1), on occurrence of a default, the operational creditor may deliver a demand notice of unpaid operational debtor copy of an invoice demanding payment of the amount involved in the default to the corporate debtor. The operational creditor may file an application after the expiry of 10 days from the date of delivery of the notice or invoice demanding payment under subsection 1 of Section 8. If the operational creditor does not receive the payment, only then it can file the proceeding as per Section 9. So we have read what is the nature, what is the time value of money, and example, voting right, initiation of the CIRP process. So how can we initiate the CIRP process as per Section 7, and how can we initiate the CIRP process as per Section 9? So now the appointment of IRP. If we will file the application as per Section 7, we have mandatory required to appoint the IRP at the time of filing the application. So the financial creditor shall, along with the application, furnish the name of the resolution professional propose to act as a IRP. So if we will, if a bank want to file a CIRP process against a company as per section 7, it is mandatorily required first to take the consent from the IRP, IP professional, that they, if they will provide their consent, the petition will be filed with the consent, and the other documents also have required to be filed with together with the petition. So the consent is first required at the time of filing the application. This is a mandatory. But in case of the operational creditor, the this is not mandatory provision. The operational creditor may propose a may means there is the word is may. If if operational creditor wants to propose, can propose. If doesn't want to propose, not propose. So this is not the mandatory provision in as per section 9 subsection 4. So an operational creditor may propose a resolution professional to act as an IR. So these are the differentiation. If you want to file any case against a company as per section 7, then you have mandatory required the IP. But in case if you want to initiate any action as per section 9 as an operational creditor, you have not mandatory required any consent from the RP. The court have the power to appoint anyone as a RP in your case. If you are not proposed, then court have the power to appoint anyone as a IP in this case. So the constitution of committee of creditors. Now, how to constitute the committee of creditors? As per section 21 subsection 2 provides, the committee of creditors shall consist solely of financial creditors and all financial creditors of the corporate debtors. Means if we want to make a COC as a IRP, I was appointed as a IRP, suppose, and we have required to constitute the COC, then we should know how many financial creditors are in the company. So we will incorporate the COC. The committee of creditors will consist solely of the financial creditor. In this case, the COC will solely consist the financial creditor and all financial creditors of the corporate debt. But Regulation 16 of IBBI, Insolvency Resolution Process of CIRP regulation, provides that where the corporate debtor has no financial debt, suppose if a company is going for the CIRP and there is no financial creditor, okay? So, or where all financial creditors are related parties of the corporate debtor, then 18 largest operational creditor by value, or if number of operational creditor is less than 18, the committee shall include all such operational creditor. Means if there is no financial creditor, so we will take the others who are the operational creditor as a COC. If there is 18 operational creditor, so we will choose 18 largest operational creditor. Or if there is less than 18 operational creditor, then all the person will constitute as the COC. So these are the wider difference between the OC and the FC debt. And now, priority in liquidation. The financial debt has the higher priority. I was already told you the section 53. I was already giving you the waterfall mechanism reference, the higher priority and the lower priority, because first we will pay the CIRP cost, we'll pay the workers and the employee salary, and then we'll go for the financial debt and then operational debt. So these are the difference between the financial creditor and the operational creditor. Now we'll start what is secured creditor and what is unsecured creditors. So IBC already make some clear distinguishment the clear distinction between the secured and the unsecured creditor, which affects their rights, obligations, and priority in the insolvency resolution process. Here is a detailed overview of the difference between the secured and unsecured creditors under IBC 2016. So, the secured creditors. What is secured creditors? As per section 3, subsection 30, how many sections now we have remember in our mind? Can anybody let me know what is the section for the financial creditor? As
Section
we have
7.
section
7.
Section 7 for initiating the proceeding.
Yeah.
But financial debt, in which provision the financial debt has been defined? I was already told you now. So I just want to involve the audience कि कोई सो तो नहीं रहा है. So I
Three
just asked
subsection
some
8.
questions. Yeah.
It's 3 subsection 8.
Yeah.
3
Okay.
subsection 8.
Subsection 8.
Yeah. Section 3 subsection 8.
Section 5 subsection 8.
No. Section 3 subsection 8.
No, this is for the creditors only.
But you have asked for financial debt, no?
Yes, financial debt. I was asked what is the sections for the financial debt.
Then that will be 5.
This is the section 5,
Yes,
it's financial debt, and this is 521 for the operational debt.
Right.
So basically, these sections we have already discussed. Now, मैं क्वेश्चंस भी पूछूंगी सर बीच बीच में तो जिससे कि सारी ऑडियंस इन्वॉल्व रहे. ठीक है सर?
Sure.
हाँ, ठीक है. Now we'll start what is a secured creditors and what is unsecured creditors. Now, the secured creditors as per sections 3 subsection 30 of the IBC code itself provide a secured creditor means a creditor in favor of whom security can say this is the secured creditor. So by example, bank and financial institutions with a mortgage on property and lenders with a charge on assets of the debtor and bondholders with specific collateral backing the debt. So these are the secured creditors. Now, what is unsecured creditors? An unsecured creditors is a creditor who does not have any security. You know, they have no security interest or lien on any assets of the debtor, like trade creditors, supplier of goods and services, because they have sold their goods, they have provided their services, but against providing the services, against providing the goods, they have no assets which is mortgaged with them. So these are the examples, and employees for unpaid wages and lenders for unsecured loans. Basically, we can see in unsecured creditors like the operational creditors and secured creditors like the financial creditors. So basically, these are the difference between the secured creditors and unsecured creditors. Now, what is the characteristic of the secured creditor and the unsecured creditors? Now, the security interest. Secured creditors have a legal claim on the lien on specific assets of the debtor as a collateral for the loan or debt. Priority in repayment. In the event of liquidation, the secured creditors are given priority over unsecured creditors. They are entitled to recover their dues from the sale of the secured assets before other creditors are paid. So they have the priority in repayment because they have already assets. And you know, in liquidation, they have discretion. Either they can distinguish their right in the property or not. They have the right. So they have the priority in repayment. Now, enforcement of right. The secured creditors have the right to enforce their security interests outside the insolvency process through mechanisms like the securitization, the SARFAESI Act. They can also initiate the proceeding in DRT as per the SURFACI Act. And relevant provision also provides section 53, I was already told you, specifies the priority of distribution of proceeds from the liquidation estate, giving secured creditor procedure precedence. So the sections 53 already provide ki, the distribution mechanism already provide ki first of all we will give the priority to the secured creditors who has already having the assets of the company. And section 52 also allows the secured creditors to relinquish their security interest and receive proceeds from the sale of the assets as part of the liquidation estate, or to enforce their security interest outside the liquidation proceeding. So they have the right, I was told you, they have the right. Now, the unsecured creditors, the characteristic of the unsecured creditors: no security interest, they have no security interest. The unsecured creditors do not have a claim on specific assets of the company because they are not having any assets. Their claim are based purely on the credit extended to the debtor without collateral. So their claim are based on purely on the credit only. So priority in repayment: in the event of liquidation, the unsecured creditors have lower priority compared to the secured creditors. They are paid after secured creditors and certain other preferential creditors are satisfied. Claims and recovery: unsecured creditor must file their claim with the insolvency resolution professional, IRP, liquidator, and recover their dues as per the resolution plan approved by the COC as per the liquidation waterfall mechanism as per section 53. So they can claim and recover only by this way because they have no right to vote in the meeting also. Section 53 outlines the priority of claim during liquidation with unsecured creditors being paid after secured creditors, workman dues, and others preferential creditors. Means first of all priority will be given to the unsecured creditors, but in when we will speak about the section 53, first we will pay the CIRP cost, then workmen employees dues, and then financial creditors who has already having the secured creditors. So after that only the unsecured creditor has required to be paid. Now, what is the difference between the secured and unsecured creditors? So the security interests we have already discussed have a legal claim on a specific assets, or in unsecured creditors, no claim on specific assets. Priority in repayment because he has the assets of the company, so has the higher priority, so can recover from the secured assets. Lower priority, they have the lower priority paid after the secured creditors, and can enforce security outside insolvency proceeding, must rely on the insolvency process for recovery. Example, we have already discussed: bank with mortgage, lender with asset charges, and trade creditor, supplier without collateral. So these are the unsecured creditors. Now, what is the forms? Suppose if I want to initiate a CIRP proceeding against a company under section 9, under section 7. So we should know what is the forms we have required to file. For initiating the CIRP by the financial creditor with the consent of the IRP, IRP will provide the consent in form 2, and form 1 have required to be filed with the fee of rupees 25,000. So if we want to initiate any proceeding against a company, we should require to file form 1 with the consent of the IRP in form 2. And in case if we want to initiate a proceeding against the operational creditor, first of all, we have required to serve the demand notice. Please, audience, told me in which section we have required to serve the demand notice. in which section we have required to provide the demand notice? Audience, can you hear me?
Section 8.
Yeah. So what is the section for serving the demand notice under IBC?
Section 10.
Section, नहीं
No.
section 8, section 8.
Yes, right. So how many time days limit given? The
10 days, 10 days,
Yes.
10 days.
So 10 days demand notice, we have informed 3. If the company will not make the payment within 10 days, then we have required to file the proceeding against the company. So the form 4 prescribed for the copy of invoice, we have required to attest with the notice in form 4 by the operational creditor. And form 5, this is a final form for filing the petition against the OC along with the fee of ₹2,000. So these are the forms for OC and the FC. Now, form 6 for initiating the CIRP by the corporate applicant. What is the section, please, audience?
Section 10.
Yes. So we will initiate the proceeding against the company itself as a corporate applicant. This form is form 6 with the fee of ₹25,000. We have required this petition. So these are the forms for filing the petition for initiating the CIRP. Now, form 1. This form is for filing the pre-packaged insolvency process if we want to initiate the application. So the form B. A person claiming to be an operational creditor other than workman or employee of the corporate debtor shall submit to the IRP, RP by post or by electronic means. Means if we are the operational creditor, like we are the employee of the company, and if we are the government authorities like BSES, like tax department, VAT department, or GST department dues, if we have, then these type of authorities have required to file the form B before the IRP, RP. Now, form financial creditor other than a financial creditor belonging to a class of creditor means if a person not belonging to the class of creditors but as a financial creditor can submit this form. So normally, if there is no home buyer, then they can submit as a financial creditor form C. In form CA, a person claiming to be a creditor in a class means if we have purchased a home from the builders and we are the home buyers, there are 100 or more home buyers, they can file their form in form CA. Then they can with together through the authorized representative can submit form E. Now, what is form F? Any other person other than the above can submit their claim in this form. Means if the person who is not falling in all these above categories, then they can submit their form in form form F. Sorry. Now, what is the timeline for submission of the form? The claim forms can be submitted within 14 days from the date of commencement of CIRP and maximum up to 90th day of commencement. So this is the timeline has been prescribed in the IBC code because this is the time-bound proceeding. This is the time-bound act. So we should remember. Now, what is the forms required to be submitted as at the stage of liquidation? We have discussed now the form is in the stage of CIRP. Now we will discuss what is the forms we have required to be submitted in liquidation stage. So I just want to ask the questions before the audience. What is the form in which a financial creditor can submit its claim? In case
Form
of
C, Form C.
Yeah. So form C. At that time we have read form C. required to be submitted by the FC, but at that time in the liquidation stage, the Form C has required to be submitted by the operational creditor. So we should remember what is the difference between, because so many times the claim forms has been rejected because of their wrong submission of the form. So we should remember this properly. In which form the claim we have required to be submitted. The person claiming to be operational credit other than workman or employee of the corporate debtor shall submit the claim to the liquidator by post or electronic means. So the Form C. Now Form D, a person claiming to be a financial creditor of the corporate debtor shall submit proof of claim to the liquidator. Now the Form E, a person claiming to be a workman or the employee of a corporate debtor shall submit its claim in Form E. We have read the Form CA before this. So, but at that time, there is no need to file a separate form for the class of creditors. So the Form D has been prescribed for all the financial credit. So the Form E is the person claiming to be a workman or employee of the corporate debtor shall submit this form. Form F, where there are dues to numerous workmen or employee of the corporate debtor, an authorized representative may submit one claim with proof. Earlier, which form we have read for this? Audience, I am asking. Earlier in CIRP process, we have read a form. Which form we have required to submit if there are so many new workmen and employee? Sir, participants, can you hear me? What?
Yes, ma'am, you are audible.
Yes. So earlier we have already read the forms has required to be submitted at the CIRP stage. What is the form name in case of numerous workmen or employee, if there? Nobody knows form. Which form we have required to be submitted? Now the Form F, but earlier this form was?
Form E.
Yes, right. So earlier we have already seen this form was E for workman and employee. Now this form is F for the workman and employee in case of liquidation. So we should remember all the forms differences. Form G, any other person other than the above can submit their claim in this form. The timeline for submission of the claim form can be submitted within 30 days from the date of the commencement of the liquidation. So earlier we have read in CIRP process, the claim form has required to be submitted within 14 days or maximum 90 days. But at that time, we have required to be submitted within 30 days. So we should remember both differences here of the timelines. Now, variations in creditors' risk tolerance and expectations. So, financial creditors' risk tolerance क्या है? The higher risk tolerance means financial creditors such a bank or a financial institutions, because they often provide a higher risk tolerance as they have mechanisms to mitigate and manage the risk, such as the diversification of their loan portfolio or collateral and the risk assessment models, because they have provided the huge loans. If company have a required a loan, the huge loans can be provided only by the financial institutions or banks. So they have the higher risk. Expect recovery. They anticipate recovery of the principal amount along with interest, which compensate for the time value of money. Means because they want to recover, they anticipate recovery of the principal amount along with interest, which compensate because they have compensate this for the time value of money. So we can say this is a risk tolerance of the financial creditors. Now, what is the risk tolerance for the operational creditors? The lower risk tolerance means the operational creditors, including supplier and employee, generally have a lower risk tolerance as they typically lack expensive mechanisms to absorb the financial shocks. So the limited collateral, they often extend credit based on the trust and business relationship with the debtor rather than the collateral. So they have the low risk. Though financial creditors' expectations, the priority in liquidation, we have already discussed, they have the priority in liquidation. The secured creditor expect to have the first claim on the proceeds from the sale of the secured assets because they are already having the secured assets. And right to enforce security. They expect to retain the right to enforce their security interest outside the insolvency proceeding if needed. And active participation in COC. We have already discussed the financial creditors always constitute as the COC if there is the FC. So they have the right to take the decision. So active participation in the COC. Now, operational creditors' expectations, the claim filing and recovery. The operational creditor expect their claim to be acknowledged and given fair consideration in the insolvency process. The limited influence, because they have the limited influence because they are not the part of the COC, they are not the decision-making power in the COC. So the priority in payment of dues, although lower than secured financial creditor, they expect to receive their dues after the secured creditors, but before equity shareholders in the liquidation waterfall mechanism. So these are the risk tolerance and the expectations of the financial creditors and the operational creditors. Now, we will discuss some cases because this is very interesting because so many times there are so many cases has been passed, there are so many orders has been passed in the cases in which we have seen some of the grounds the creditors was treated as the financial creditor or operational creditors. So there is a need to discuss these cases also. So we will discuss the Swiss Ribbon Private Limited. You know, these are the popular cases of Supreme Court. So Swiss Ribbon Private Limited and ANR versus Union of India and ORS. This case, I will show you some of the brief facts of the case. The present petition assails the constitutional validity of various provisions of the Insolvency and Bankruptcy Code 2016. There are means constitutional validity has been challenged in this case. The first argument of the case is on the appointment of the members of the NCLT and NCLAT in accordance with the aforesaid judgment. The second argument, there is no real difference. We will now, because the topic is difference between the financial creditor and operational creditor, so we will discuss here only the second points because there are so many arguments on so many constitutional validity points, but we will discuss on the only the second points. The second argument, there is no real difference between the financial creditors and operational creditors. According to the council, both type of creditors would give either money in terms of loan or money's worth in terms of goods and services. Thus, there is no intelligible differentiation between the two type of creditors because the council has made this argument. First and foremost, unless they amount to 10% of the aggregate of the amount of the debt owed, they have no voice in the committee of creditors. So in this case, the argument was point out on the differentiation between the financial creditor and the operational creditor. Now, what is the court held? The Supreme Court, the Honorable Supreme Court has held in this case the classification of creditors into financial creditor and operational creditors, neither arbitrary nor discriminatory. because they are saying this is arbitrary and discriminatory, but the court has told कि neither arbitrary and nor discriminatory nor violative of Article 14. So the Supreme Court upheld the distinction, stating that financial creditors are typically involved in larger amount of money the huge loans to the company. If there is a need of a loan to the company, they provide the huge loan, larger amount of loan they are provided. So your we can say ki, stating that the financial creditors are typically involved in larger amounts of money and have the expertise to assess the viability of corporate debtors. In contrast, the operational creditors provide goods and services and are not usually involved in the long-term financial assessments. So we can say there is a need to make a difference, and this cannot be said as arbitrary or discriminatory. So this argument was decided by this judgment was decided by the Supreme Court. And there are some other provisions are also discussed in this court, but now this is relevant for us because as per the today's topic, this is relevant for us. Now, the another case. We will discuss now the another case. This is also a very popular case of the Supreme Court. The Innovative Industries Limited versus ICICI Bank ANR 2017. So the brief facts of the case I will tell you. The appellant before us is a multi-product company catering to applications in diverse sectors. From August 2012, owing to labor problems, the appellant began to suffer losses. So the applicant was not able to service the financial assistance given to it by 19 banking entities, which had extended credit to the appellant. The appellant itself proposed corporate debt restructuring. The 19 entities formed a consortium led by the Central Bank of India, and by the joint meeting dated this. It was decided that CDR resolution plan would be approved, but this was also not worked at that time. The joint lender forms a meeting of 24th June 2014 finally approved the restructuring plan. An application was made on 7th December 2016 by ICICI Bank Limited, in which it was stated that the appellant being a defaulter within the meaning of the court. So ICICI Bank has been initiate the process against the Innovative Industries Limited in this case. And now, what is the Supreme Court held in this case? The Supreme Court clarified the definition of financial debt, emphasizing that it includes any liability or obligation in respect of a claim which is disbursed against the consideration for the time value of money. So we are discussing what is the time value of money. So basically this was held in this case. The Supreme Court clarified the definition of financial debt in this case, because we already know this is the first case of before in which the Supreme Court passed the order. So they have emphasized the financial debt also, and they also emphasize that it includes any liability or obligation in respect of claim which is disbursed against the consideration for the time value of money. So before verifying any claim, we should know, we should consider, is there any time value of money or commercial effect of borrowing involved in this claim or not? Next, we also discuss the third case is Mobilox Innovatives Private Limited versus Krusha Software Private Limited. The brief facts. The appellant was engaged by Star TV. You know, everybody knows Star TV, I think, for conducting the televoting for the Nach Baliye. Everybody knows this program name, Nach Baliye, which was coming on the Star TV program. So the appellant was engaged by Star TV for conducting televoting for the Nach Baliye program on Star TV. It is also important to note that a non-disclosure agreement, herein after referred to as the NDA, was executed between the parties on 26 December 2014 with effect from 1st November 2013. More than a month after the execution of aforesaid agreement, the appellant on 30th January 2015 wrote to the respondent that they were withholding the payment against invoices raised by the respondent, as the respondent had disclosed on their web page that they had worked for the Nach Baliye program run by the Star TV and had thus breached the NDA agreement. So the tribunal dismissed the aforesaid application. However, NCLT allowed the appeal. Now, what is the Supreme Court held in this case? The Supreme Court, the Honorable Supreme Court, allowed the appeal while interpreting the expression existence of a dispute under Section 8, subsection 2A of the Insolvency and Bankruptcy Code. The Honorable Supreme Court was of the opinion that the breach of NDA was sufficient to construe the existence of a dispute to initiate the invalidate the CIRP application filed by the operational creditor. So I just want to ask a question before the audience. In which case, in which section we have required to initiate the proceeding against the company as an operational creditor, and if there is a dispute between the company and the parties, then this will be admitted or not admitted. Can anybody told me?
Section 9, and this
Yeah.
will not be admitted.
Yeah. So by this case, we have read what is the ruling said by the Supreme Court. So it is specifically said that while interpreting the expression, the existence of dispute, if there is any dispute involved under Section 8, subsection 2A of the Insolvency and Bankruptcy Code, the Honorable Supreme Court was of the opinion that the breach of NDA was sufficient to construe the existence of a dispute. So it doesn't mean that there should be an arbitration dispute or there should be some dispute in the court. So breach of NDA is itself as a dispute to invalidate the CIRP application filed by the operational creditors. Now, the next case. This is very interesting and very recent case. The Greater Noida Industrial Development Authority versus Prabhajit Singh Soni and ANR case. Decided on 12 February 2024, recently. So brief facts I will show you. On 28/10/2010, one of the plots of land acquired by it was allotted by way of lease for 90 years to Messrs. JNC Construction Private Limited, the corporate debtor, by charging premium payable in installment starting from 29/10/12 up to 29/4/2020, subject to payment of interest as well as penal interest, while reserving right to cancel the lease and resume the demised land, subject to certain conditions. The corporate debtor committed default in payment of installments and was served with demand cum pre-cancellation notice. The company petition filed against the CD for initiating the CIRP was admitted on 30th 5/2019, and pursuant to the public notice in the month of January 2020, the appellant submitted a claim of rupees 43 crores 40,31,951 being unpaid installment payable towards premium for the lease. The claim was set up by the appellant as a financial creditor of the CD. However, the RP treated the appellant as an operational creditor, and wide email dated 4/2/2020 requested the appellant to submit its claim in Form B as the operational creditor of the CD. The appellant did not submit its claim afresh as an operational creditor. In the meantime, the NCLT, vide its order dated 4/8/2020, approved the resolution plan. So on 6/10/2020, the appellant filed the IA, the interim interlocutory application. The NCLT wide order dated 5/4/2021 rejected the aforesaid IA, and the appeal preferred by the appellant was also dismissed by the NCLT and wide the impugned order. So now, what is the Supreme Court has held in this case? The Supreme Court held the wrong classification of creditors, because there was the wrong classification of the creditors in this case. The resolution plan did not specifically place the appellant in the category of a secured creditor, even though by virtue of section 13A of the UP Industrial Area Development Act 1976, in respect of amount payable to it, a charge was created on assets of the CD, because there was a charge has been created already on the assets of the CD. And non-replacement placement of the appellant in the class of secured creditor did affect it in interest. Obviously, they are not have the right to vote in the meeting of the COC, so it's itself affect their interest. So the appeal of the appellant is entitled to be allowed and are accordingly allowed. The impugned order dated 24/10/2022 is set aside. So the Supreme Court have set aside the order of NCLT. The order dated passed by NCLT approving the resolution plan was also set aside. The resolution plan has to be sent back. In this case, the resolution plan was already approved by the NCLT, but this has been now has been sent back. This sent back to the COC for resubmission. So after satisfying the parameters set out by the code as exposed above, so the resolution plan set back, the order already approved by the NCLT also set aside. So I want to tell you that first of all, we should properly consider when any claim has been submitted before as us as a IRP, RP liquidator, what is the scenario of the debt? What type of debt involved in this? Is like the financial debt or the operational debt? Because I have seen so many times on the face we have seen this is the operational debt, but sometimes there was involved some time value of money and consideration of commercial and the commercial effect of borrowing. By this way, this will become as the financial debt. So we should first of all consider what is this. Is this fall in the criteria of the financial debt, or is this fall in the criteria of the operational debt? Now, the another case, this is the NCLT judgment, the Vinod Avasthi versus AMR Infrastructure Limited. It's a very brief facts. Is in this case involved the distinction between the financial and operational creditor in the context of real estate transaction. So as per the NCLT, sorry, held that the home buyer can be considered as the FC financial creditors because they provide advance payments for future delivery of property, which amounts to a financial debt. So this was held in this case. Now, now I think everybody has to be cleared on the point of what is the difference between the financial debt and what is the operational debt. So we'll go. I will also show you some of the PPT, what is the timeline and how we can go for the CIRP process. So what is the timeline specified? Basically, what is the timeline has been prescribed by the code for completion of the CIRP is the first, we will file the application either in
Ma'am, there is one query, if
Yeah.
allow me, can I ask?
Yes, sir.
Ma'am, in a operational debt, in a case of a co-developer in a real estate project, the
Hmm.
co-developer is there and the joint owner, he's not a promoter or a this, he is a landowner and the CD is the developer.
Okay.
So in that case, the landowner claim fall under the financial creditor or operational creditor.
Because they have given their land for a time value of money.
They
And
are
for
expecting
yeah,
some consideration is pending,
yeah. So
or
they have,
they have a understanding also कि they have given some amount of loan to the CD,
hmm.
which will be recovered in the shape of developed unit.
Okay. So as per my views, this will be considered as a financial debtor because there is in the involvement of the time value of money, as I was understanding, and the commercial effect of borrowing is already also involved in this. So as per my knowledge or as per my view, this should be considered as a FC.
Okay, ma'am. Thank you
Yeah.
so much. You can continue, ma'am.
Okay, sir. So, because sir, if first of all, we should try to consider the claimant as a financial creditor, if there is, because they have some more opportunity we can provide them, because they can have the right in COC also. So we should try, if there is there are some amount which we have seen on the face, this having the time value of money, then we should try to consider this as a financial creditor as per my understanding or my knowledge. Because in STC case, I will tell you, there was only a agreement between the parties for the shipment of some goods and products from outside the country. But in this case, the agreement was executed, but the STC has been provided the CC limit to the company for purchasing these materials from another company which was the outside India. So at that time, when I was not involved in the case in 2019, they have some other lawyers have assumed this is the operational creditor, and they have filed the application before the NCLT. But when I was take this assignment, I was considered this as a financial creditor because the CC limit has been provided by the STC to the company. So, so as per my knowledge and understanding at that time, I was considered that the time value of money is involved in this case. And after that, the NCLT Chandigarh bench has passed a decision in this case, and they have also held this is the financial creditor. So, the main thing is the time value of money. If there is the involvement, I think the court will decide on the basis of this also. So we should consider this thing.
Understood, ma'am. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, sir. Now I will go how to initiate the CIRP process. So first of all, the commencement of CIRP and appointment of IRP. First, we have filed the application against the company as per section 9, 7 or 10, whatever, the commencement has been started. So this will be considered as a T. Now we will file the public announcement as a IRP we have appointed in the company as per the court order. So we will first make a public announcement within T plus 3 days. So this is very time bound. I just want to show you ki how can we say this is time bound. So there is everything has been prescribed a time in this. So public announcement inviting the claim is T plus 23 days. So IRP will make a public announcement either as per section 7, if he is appointed, either as per 9, he is appointed, either section 10, he is appointed. Now, submission of claim. If we are, suppose if the CIRP has been started against a company and publication made, then we know this company has gone for the CIRP process. Now we will file a claim. So we will file a claim before the IRP within T plus 14 days. So this is also time bound. We have to required to file this within 14 days and up to 90th day of the commencement. So this is the timeline for filing for submission of the claim. Now, the verification of claim. We suppose if the claim has been come before the IRP and COC has been constituted. Now the verification of claim is in the hand of the IRP RP. So within 7 days after receiving the claim, required to verify the claim. Sometimes logically this was not happened because there are so many vouchers, there are so many invoices have required to be checked. So we can make an email to the client, to the claimant, that if we have not able to verify within 7 days, so we can make a claim to them that provide us some more times because we are on the stage of the claim verification. So first of all, at least one mail we should be dropped if we are not able to verify within 7 days. So the application for appointment of AR within 2 days for from verification. So if we have verified the claim within 21 days, then we have required to appoint a authorized representative within 2 days from the date of the verification. So this is also important. Report certifying constitution of COC. Now we have required to meeting of COC within 7 days filing of the report. So first of all, we have constituted the COC. Now we will make a meeting of COC within 7 days after filing this report. So where we have required to file this report, we will file this report before the NCLT. So point to be remember. First of all, we will verify the claim, make the report and file the report, and now constitute the COC and also file this report to IBBI also. So first meeting of the COC will be constituted within 30 days. Now resolution to appoint the RP by COC. Now I was told you if if we are the financial creditor, we have the voting right, we can participate in the COC, we can give their voting. So the resolution to appoint the RP by COC is passed by the COC within T plus 30 days. The IRP perform functions of IRP till the RP is appointed. So the IRP perform the functions of IRP perform the functions of RP till RP is appointed. Means if suppose the COC not constituted some of the reason and the COC meeting was not held, if held, they have not take the decision for changing of the RP IRP, then the IRP perform the function of RP till the RP is appointed. तो जब तक ये appoint नहीं हो जाता है, the IRP, the existing IRP will continue as a RP T plus 40 days. Now appointment of RP within 7 days, appointment of RP not later than 47 days. Means the appointment of RP within 7 days hoga and the appointment of RP not later than 47 days. And submission, these are the directory provision because so many cases I have seen. The whole year has been passed, but IRP continue as a IRP and till the date they have not become as a RP in the company. So this is practically I have seen so many cases. The submission of IM to COC within 2 weeks of appointment of RP not later than 54 days. So the submission of IM, information memorandum, made by the RP to and it is submitted to the COC within 2 weeks of appointment of RP and not later than 54 days. And publish Form G and invitation of EOI. So this is the T plus 75 days. We will publish Form G because the 180 days we have required to complete the whole process. So within 75 days, we have required to publish Form G and invitation of EOI. We will invite. Now submission of EOI at least 15 days from the issue of the EOI. Now we will submit EOI at least 15 days from the issue of the EOI, means T plus 90 days. Means if we have published the form, now the someone who is interested in our company, they will submit their EOI. So the 15 days has been given for this. The provisional list declared by the RP of RAs, yani resolution applicants by RP within 10 days from the receipt of the EOI. Means if you have received the EOI from some other person who are interested in the company, then you will make the final list of the PRA, provisional list of resolution applicants within 10 days. Now submission of objection on provisional list. Suppose if anybody have some objections on the provisional list, they can submit their objections on this. And issue of RFRP including the evaluation metrics. And you have required as a IRP to submit RFRP including the evaluation metrics, if anything required, to the RAs. So the final list has been prepared by the RP. Now, the receipt of the resolution plan. The receipt of the resolution plan is the T plus 135 days, at least 30 days from the issue of the RFRP. Suppose if you have issued the RFRP in T plus 105 days, now the 30 days you have required to give, and the receipt of the resolution plan is the within 30 days from the issue of the RFRP. Now, approved resolution. Now the COC will be held, give the voting rights on the resolution plan. The COC meeting will be conducted, and they will take the final decision whether approve the resolution plan or whether not approve the resolution plan. If they have not approved the resolution plan, then the company will go for the liquidation. Suppose if there are 2 or 3 plans has been submitted and COC not take the decision in any of the plan, then the company will go for the liquidation. And another case of the liquidation is also there. Suppose if no plan has been submitted in your company, nobody is interested in your company, then also company will go for the liquidation. So submission of COC approved resolution plan to AA T plus 165 days and approval of RP by AA. So approval of RP resolution plan by the adjudicating authority within T plus 180 days. I was told you this time limit is very crucial. T plus 180 days was given prescribed in the act, and extension was also provided. But first time extension we can take only for the 60 days, and maximum 90 days extension is only provided in the act. So we should be careful for proceeding. And submission of application for withdrawal before the issue of the EOI. We can go, suppose if a financial creditor have been filed the application, initiate the application against a company, section 7, but now for the withdrawal as already provided in the act, section 12, I think so, 12A maybe. So this section is already provided for the withdrawal, but there is some condition that submission of application for withdrawal before issue of EOI means if before issue of EOI, we should go for the withdrawal. After submission of the EOI, we should not go. But before the issue of EOI, we can go for the withdrawal. So RP to form an opinion and preferential or other transaction. Now, RP has required to form an opinion on the preferential and other transaction. This is very important because we have required to check is there any preferential transaction or the other transaction has been involved in the case or not. So we should check how can we check what is the criteria of this section 43, 44. These are the sections of the preferential and other transactions. So RP form an opinion within 75 days. RP to make a determination on preferential or other transaction, and determination has to be made within T plus 115 days. Now RP to file the application before the AA for taking the relief on preferential transaction. Now the RP has filed some application before the adjudicating authority for taking relief on the preferential transaction. You know, so many applications has been filed before the adjudicating authority in this case, and because there are some transaction which was held during before initiating the proceeding within two years or 1 years by the related parties. So we have required to check if these type of transactions are involved, then we should go and we should determine on this and we should file the application before the NCLT. So these are the timelines which is specifically prescribed in the CIRP process, and this is applicable both for the financial creditor also and the operational creditor also. There is no distinguishment. The 180 days, the same time provided for the FC and the same time provided for the OC. So these are the timelines. Now, if anybody have any doubts can ask.
Madam, regarding the time value of money,
Yeah.
in one of my case, there is a CNF agency agreement.
Sir?
CNF agency agreement.
CNF agency is
Agreement.
okay, agreement, okay.
And there is some security deposit which was taken.
Okay.
And in the point of commission, it is written that some say 1.5% per month is the amount on investment that is to be paid. And 5% per month on the net sales that will be paid. So is that particular creditor should be treated as operational creditor or financial creditor? Because there is specific term in that CNF agency agreement that I mean 1.5% per month is to be paid on the investment, which is the security deposit, and 5% per month on the net sales. They are to be paid.
So there are some provision also in the act which is by which we can bifurcate. Some amount can be considered as a financial debt, and some amount, to the extent of some amount, we can consider this as a operational debt. So I think as per the 1.5%, the fixed amount, the security interest, as you are saying, monthly basis, they should be considered as a financial debt, and the another amount which is for the operations or sale or something, so they should be considered as a operational debt as per my views.
No, but whether that person is to be treated as a financial creditor or operational creditor.
Sir, to the extent of because the same person can also be treated as a financial creditor to some extent of the amount, and we can also treat the same person as a operational creditor to the some extent of amount. If there are the two type of transactions was
No, why
involved.
I'm asking this is particularly in this case, in that particular CD, there are no bankers or financial institution as such.
Yeah,
who
sir,
would be
this
treated
is
as
not
financial
necessary.
creditor.
Sir,
So I'm constituting a committee where there
Yeah.
are only operational creditors.
okay.
That provision is already there, but in this case, because of this kind of agreement where that particular person could be treated as financial creditor, and so the others won't have any place in that COC. Because this particular person maybe have with that agreement itself will be the only financial creditor of that CD. That is what is my point.
So, as per my knowledge and understanding, we can treat the same person to the some debt to the extent of some amount as a operational creditor as well as a financial creditor also. But in your case, on the face, as you was told me, there are some security interest has been involved. So the time value of money has came at that time point. So this should be treated as a financial creditor to this
Correct.
point.
Correct.
Okay.
Correct.
So at that time, if there are two type of transaction involved, so you have to make a bifurcation. How much amount is for the financial debt and how much amount for the operational debt. You make a bifurcation of the whole amount of dues which is due from the company he has. You make a bifurcation. This 10 rupees is for the financial debt and 10 rupees for the operational debt. So to the extent of 10 rupees, you should treat him as a financial creditor, and to the extent of another 10 rupees, you should treat him as a operational creditor.
Absolutely. That is what
Yeah.
is my stand as well.
Yeah, so I just want to describe this. Now is any other query on this? Because my presentation has been finished now. So I don't know how, because the 3 hours time is prescribed, but I have finished this now. So if anybody have any discussion points or if any queries, we can discuss at that time. So can I ask some questions if audience can provide some answers of it?
Sure, ma'am, please.
Yeah. Suppose if a company has not decided any any RP, and the proceeding is already going on in the company, and the COC meeting was held on a timely basis whenever they have called. So, is there any right to the management to file any case before the NCLT that till the date they have not take the decision on the IR on the appointment of RP? Is the management have the right?
No, we couldn't understand, ma'am.
I repeated my question.
Yeah.
Suppose if a company is already in IBC process, in CIRP process, and there was Mr. M has been appointed as a IRP, but the proceeding is continued, and 180 days has already been expired, already finished, but till the date the COC has not. Yeah, COC has not made any decision on the appointment of the IRP. on the appointment of RP, sorry. So the management have the power to file any application before the NCLT that the COC is still not decided this, or the operational creditor have the power to file the application because they have no right to vote in the meeting. But can they file any application before the NCLT that the RP is still not appointed by the COC?
No, I don't think management can file because the process is continuing and IRP is performing the duties of the RP. So
Yeah.
the process has not been disrupted for non-appointment of RP. So I don't think case can be filed.
Okay, okay. So, some of the cases we have already also seen that there are some FDs amount or investments in the company, but the state government or the VAT department have the right, have lien on these dues. So after initiating the COC, after initiation of the CIRP process, can they hold these security deposits or everything with them, or they have required to release these deposits on which they have already having the lien?
I think they, after the initiation of CIRP, they have no right to continue to hold that. They have to release it. Because earlier there was a provision for setting of the setting of the dues, but
Yes,
I think there is one case where this right has been withdrawn, and after the commencement it is not allowed.
yes, yes. And there are also a case, I think Bharat Vidyut Nigam, I think case is there. And the Rainbow case, this is just different case. So this was overruled by the Vidyut Nigam case after the Supreme Court ruling on this point. So if anybody have any doubt, can ask on this.
Whether within the secured creditor, is there any priority ranking?
In case of secure creditors, is there any priority? Yes, there is the priority as per section 53 is already provide for the waterfall mechanism. They have the right to relinquish their assets, or they can go for the prior payment from the others, or if they don't want to relinquish their assets, they can sell their assets outside the proceedings, outside the liquidation. They have the right.
The relinquishment part is only with respect to the formation of the liquidation estate.
Yeah.
But I am asking whether the secured creditors within themselves have a ranking, because somebody may be having higher security interest and the other may be having lower security interest.
Sir, ranking as such, as per my knowledge and understanding, there is no ranking has been provided and specified by the IBC code itself. And the FC, yeah, COC is only decided as on the basis of the dues. How much dues are there? If they are having 33% dues of the whole dues, then they will consider as the FC. The ranking is itself not provided in the act as per my knowledge and understanding. So all the creditors will be equivalent. If they are the financial creditor, they will fall in the same category.
So you mean in spite of the fact that any creditor is having first charge, other creditor is having second charge, there will not be a priority as such, right?
No priority, they have the priority. If they are the financial creditor, they have the priority. If they have the assets of the company as a secured creditor, they have the priority.
No, within
Yeah.
themselves, what his point was, suppose one creditor is having the first charge and the other creditor on the same property is having second charge.
Okay.
Then whether A will be at par with B or A will
But
get some
at the
priority over B.
Yes, sir. At the time of taking the voting rights, at the time of deciding the vote in CIRP process. I was talking about only the CIRP process. At the time of constituting the COC, there is no rank. There is no bifurcation, whether he has the first charge on the property, whether he has the second charge on the property, the all FC, they will assumed as the FC only, financial creditor only at that time. But at the time of liquidation, at that time only they will consider who will be paid first. The first charge holder will be paid first, the second charge holder paid the secondly. So at that time, this will be decided only. But at the stage of the CIRP, we cannot make any ranking.
So you mean while distribution under section 53,
Yeah.
there will be prioritization.
Yes, there is the prioritization. Basically, first we will pay this cost. If they are the security, they have some securities with them, then we will make the bifurcation, how we will make the payment to them as a first charge holder or the second charge holder.
Madam, in the IRP process,
Hmm?
first charge and charge should be amount has to be decided by the RP, RSA only,
Sir, I'm not.
RPA, because he is deciding to whom to pay, what is the amount to pay. It is up to COC to accept it or reject.
Sir, I'm not able to understand you. Oh,
Because first charge is always a priority.
yes,
But
sir.
in the case of CIRP, the resolution applicant
Hmm.
has the freedom to decide how much to be given to each creditor. It is up to the COC.
In
accept or
proportion,
reject.
sir, in proportion of their dues, they have to be paid in liquidation, na?
But no preference to the first charge holder.
Yes, preference has to be given to the first charge holder. Yes, sir.
CRP, everything is wide open.
दूसरा इसमें भावना का एक लिखूं, भावना के नाम से एक बनेगा, भावना को पार्टी बनाना है इसमें। वो वेंडर
So
वेंडर बनाना भावना को 1000 रुपए का बिल बनेगा।
any other query also?
भावना को पेमेंट नहीं कर पाएगा तो फिर 3 महीने होगा, 6000 32,000 हर महीने का अप्रैल में क्यों नहीं 6000 रुपए का जोड़ाओगे 30 जून को और 10% टीडीएस काटोगे और वो टीडीएस में दिखाओगे जल्दी दिखाया हुआ है। पहले पार्टी बनाना फिर इसी को क्लोन करते हैं। फिर नंबर नॉर्मल को डालते हैं 0.0 डालते हैं फिर लिखते हैं किलोमीटर्स पर द मंथ ऑफ अप्रैल मई जून 24 यहाँ पे डाला 96,000 98 पार्टनर प्रोडक्शन
I think, ma'am, we can conclude as your, presentation and there are no questions.
Okay, okay, sir. Sir, actually, I was sorry कि 6 o'clock तक का टाइम था, but the presentation कुछ ज्यादा ही मैंने जल्दी से शो करके और खत्म कर दिया। Sir, yeah, so okay, sir.
Is there anybody from ICSI to get it concluded?
हो गया 32,15 पहले कितनी थी 204 मिला के बढ़ना क्यों हो रही हो ये 30 है अप्रैल के बाद है सारी ये बल्कि इसलिए पूरा हुआ पेमेंट मेड करो इस सेम डेट में और बराबर मत कर देना ऐसे रहेगा एक पर डिलीट करो एक डिलीट करो एक एंट्री करो एक डिलीट करो एक मेरा तो अलग ही सब बैंक से मैच हो गया मैं घर नहीं जाता समझ लो क्या पहले सैलरी में डालो सैलरी नहीं है पेमेंट मेड में जाना चाहिए ठीक है तो ये पेमेंट तो ये सारी की सारी पेमेंट आना तो
Anjali, madam.
Anjali,
Yes, sir.
Ma'am,
Uh,
you can conclude as there are no questions and madam has not taken even break during the process. And
Ma'am, do you want to continue or we can conclude?
ma'am, conclude because my presentation is end of now, so I don't think कि, there are some more presentation I didn't have now. And if any participants have any query, so we'll provide the answer, whatever the knowledge we have. So if not, then we can conclude now.
Ingredients, Silicon, HCI, Medata, Ionic,
So thank you very much, ma'am, for taking out time and addressing session for the webinar on the topic differentiating financial and operational creditors under IBC. Thank you very much, ma'am, for sharing your experience and learning. Ma'am, you are requested to share the PPT with me.
Yes.
ठीक है और बाकी तो फाइनल लोकेशन ये भी जो मैंने ऐड कर दी उसमें
वो चारों प्लान
वही लोग ना जो आज भी काम चला सेव कर दिया
Ma'am, you can share it on mail. I'm sending you one email. You can send it on revert to that
पहले
email.
सैलरी में डाला हुआ था अब उनको बिल में डाल रहे हैं और जो मई में हुई है तो
Hello, ma'am, you are not audible. Hello.
Hello?
Yes, ma'am. What are you saying, ma'am?
Ma'am, I am saying that you can share the PPT on my email.
Okay, no issue. I will share. Ma'am. And thank you so much to the ICSI IPA members who has attending today's webinar and all other members who are also attending and give the time on this topic. So thank you so much.
Thank you very much to you also, ma'am, for taking out time and addressing the session and sharing your views.
Thank you. Can I leave now?
Sure, ma'am, sure.
Okay, thank you so much.